there we go. Coach Pollock, to the best of my memory, you grew up in DeSoto, Missouri. Tell us a little bit about DeSoto, Missouri, and your playing days over there.
Okay, let's go back. I was the oldest of 8 children. My mother took off from day one. I was raised by my grandmother. I have a brother who was the same situation, raised by grandmother from day one. The other 6 in my family, there's 8 of us, were raised in an orphanage. I can tell you what it was like to be poor. We didn't have jack squat. And I can remember some of the good days, like going to the prom. I went in a borrowed suit. I got to the prom, and we were all standing around, and I stuck my hand in the pockets and pulled out a handful of mothballs. Those were some great days. So my grandmother raised us. My brother, he went to church every Sunday in a pair of shoes that was borrowed from a lady up the street. I do know what it's like to be poor, but I had a very good high school coach, went through there. And then after high school, I signed to go to SEMO. The one thing I'll always remember about SEMO is Kenny Knox was the coach, and he said, you'll have to have a suit to come to school here. I had no suit, and I could have got one, but it scared me. So I ended up in the Navy, got out of the Navy. I played service ball, ended up at the University of Minnesota. Stayed there 2 years, had a nasty blood clot in my chest. Ended up in the hospital for some time, and then I came to SIU because I had a lot of friends here. But really, the good part about every bit of this is the fact that I feel like I did well coming from where I came from. I had the most wonderful grandmother in the world. She was the most wonderful woman, and I'll owe her everything until the day I die. But the good part is seeing you people do good. This is not about me, it's about all the people. And when you look at our class, our football team, you got doctors and lawyers and teachers and you name it, they're all in there. And it's just a great bunch of kids. Not only that, look at the ACT scores back then. I think at one time we had 48 kids dressed and we had 30 kids with a 28 or better on the ACT. And those are the things I'll always remember. The only other thing I'll always remember, I was the first one ever put into my high school Hall of Fame, and to me that was one of the biggest honors. But this is not about me, it's about you guys.
You played at SIU, and I'm not sure if I'm right here, but is that where the nickname Pappy came from?
No. Pappy came from Corky Ott, who announced the ball games up there, and we were playing Marion one night, and Marion was predicted to beat us. Merle Jones had predicted the scores, and we were kicking them pretty well. And old Corky Ott said over the PA system, "You can't beat old Pappy." That's where it came from.
You came to Carbondale High School. Was that your first coaching job coming out of SIU?
Yeah, the year before, I did my student teaching, and I worked with Frank Blair. That was Frank's last year, and kind of out of a surprise, he came in. I ended up with a part-time job there, teaching 4 hours PE, and he came in one day and he said, "That's it. Hey, I'm not coming back the second semester." And he said, "I'm going to recommend you get this job," and he did, and he and Reed Martin together got me the job.
You followed Coach Blair as head coach of the Carbondale Terriers, and following a legend is not easy. And ironically, your records were almost identical. In your 10 years at Carbondale, you won just about the same amount of games as Coach Blair. How hard was that? And were you your own man when you started your program, or you kind of answered that a few minutes ago about Coach Blair? How did you approach the job?
Well, the thing was, when I worked with Coach Blair, he, was a Notre Dame grad. Coach Blair believed in team unity and team spirit and things that it takes to make a winner. But one of the things I'll always remember that drove me nuts we would sit in the coach's office, and I'd look at the clock, and it'd be 10 to 4, and we'd just sit there, and the squad would be out there in a circle doing calisthenics, and they would work for a half hour just doing calisthenics, but they always had a lot of spirit. We would go out there, and he'd get on the sled and ride the sled, and Reed Martin would take the backs, and I would take the group and throw passes to them, and then I'd take the D-backs, kind of work with everybody. But as far as, it gave me the opportunity when I went in there to be my own man, because I was more wanting to get out there and get with it in a hurry, and he was one of these guys that just laid back, and, man, he could get them ready to play.
Your first two ball clubs only lost one game, 8-1 and 9-1. Tell us a little bit about those first two teams.
Boy, it's tough to remember. The first year when we were in the SWE, we had a couple of close ball games there. We beat Pinckneyville, I think, 7-0, and we beat Murphy. Murphy was always the big rival. We played that on Armistice Day out at SIU Stadium, and that was always the big. But I don't really remember that much about those first 2 years. I know we had a couple outstanding football players. Chuck Grace, who went to Duke, was a heck of a football player. Bobby Goro, one of our linemen, and ended up there. Denny Pankey, he made the all-conference team and made all-Southern Illinois. So there was some talent there, and, we just put it together, and the good thing was those kids believed. We opened the year at West Frankfort, and we upset them, and that started us on the way.
The 68 team was undefeated and back-to-back conference champions. When did you know that team could be something special?
In 67, because, that was a great group there. And people will tell you, like Harry Stewart, who coached at Benton, and those people, in 67, I think we lost 2 Centralia. And people will tell you at the end of the year, I remember setting up at Mount Vernon. We had beaten Mount Vernon. Harry Stewart, the coach at Benton, came in and he said, "Hey, you guys have improved so much that you would kick Centralia now." And I really did feel that way about it. And we had all those guys coming back.
After the 67 season and the 68 school year, you almost left to go to SIU. In fact, you decided to leave and coach at SIU. What changed your mind? What brought you back?
Well, a couple of things. When you coach at that level, and you're an assistant, you're not your own person. You're going here, you're going there. And I remember one night coming home, and we had just had a baby. That my wife had just had that baby, and oh, Lord, I got home about 2 o'clock in the morning. She was sick, up crying and carrying on, and I thought, no, this isn't the life for me. I just didn't like the recruiting. I didn't like going in Sundays at noon. Saturdays, we were there all day, and it just seemed like we sat around and wasted a lot of time when we didn't have to be there, but then that's the way it goes.
Some of the success of the 67 and 68 ball club was because of the end of Attucks High School and also University High. Attucks in 64 brought us some athletes, and University School brought us athletes and something else too.
Oh, you're making reference to those helmets that they brought us. Yeah, people don't realize this. The Terriers was the last school in Southern Illinois to play in leather helmets. And I'll tell you something else. The Terriers were the first school in Southern Illinois to play in white shoes. And I'll never forget that. We ordered white shoes. John Whittenborn was at Murfreesboro, and so we split an order so that we could get the order of 100 pair of shoes. Well, the shoes didn't come in, and we got them that Friday around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the biggest mistake we ever made, we put the kids in those leather white shoes to play that night, and every one of them were blistered by halftime.
Yeah. Coach Pollock, going into the 68 season, I know how our class felt ever since we went 9-1 as sophomores and losing the last game to Mount Vernon. We wanted to go undefeated. Was it a realistic goal of yours to go undefeated going into the 68 year?
Absolutely. Because I tell you what, we accomplished an awful lot during the summer months. I think we were ahead of an awful lot of schools when it came to that. Getting prepared, especially in the summer. And I think we were ahead of a lot of schools when we prepared each week for a ball game, because we spent hours and hours at that gym on Sunday looking at those film. And I just think we did a pretty good job. In fact, I don't know, Merle Jones had something in one of these articles about every time they go out there, they're well prepared and have a shrewd game plan.
You had a great coaching staff. Back in those days, though, there wasn't a lot of coaches like you see today on the sideline, but you had some great assistants. Talk about some of those guys.
Well, Bill Yates coached for us. And one of the things I always think about Bill, he was very, very punctual. He was always working on the basics. He never tried to overcoach. Everything was very basic with him. I remember one time we went somewhere to play a ball game, and the managers had left the kicking tee at home, the extra point tee. And Bill got 2 bars of soap and taped them together, and we kicked every extra point that night. And then we thought about that. But Bill was a darn good coach. Bob Odom, he coached the lower level, and Bob was very fundamental, and Bob loved to win. So, you wasn't going to get ahead of him on that. He practiced hard because he practiced because he wanted to win. And you go on down, you had guys like Walt Moore. Oh, man, Walt had over 100 freshmen one year. And I'll never forget, they gave Walt a standing ovation at the banquet because he knew every kid's name. But along with Walt, John Cherry coached freshman football for us, and he did a good job and outstanding. John was a winner too, and he had success in basketball. All that was part of it. And then you had guys like John Stengel that got in there 1 year or two, and John didn't know a lot of football, but he was there every day learning football. So he did a great job. And of course, we had Larry Kristoff. That's one of my all-time favorite jokes. We were playing, and about the 3rd game of the year, Larry said, "Hey, I can't be here. I'm going to the World Games Sunday morning, so I'll see you when I get back." And I coached that whole team pretty much by myself the rest of the year. And we were playing in Mount Vernon the last game of the year, and here Larry comes walking across the field carrying an umbrella. And he said, "Hey, I'm back." I'll never forget that. The guy was gone the whole year, comes back at halftime.
You didn't forget how to talk at the Hall of Fame.
Who's that?
No,
Larry.
no, he was there.
Yeah.
My
we
goodness.
sat at the same table.
Oh, Larry, he would always say, pick up the phone and say, "Operator, I want to make a long distance call." But, he was Ozarkite type. But, I love the guy to death. Larry Wagner. Now, Larry was tough to play for. There was only one way to play, and that's blood and guts. And you get down there, and you better get some blood on you, because you're going to go through it if you played for Larry Wagner. Gordon Butler. Gordon was a good coach. He just kind of did what he was supposed to do, and that was it. He never wanted to interfere with calling plays or anything like that. He was just right there helping all the time. I can't remember. Oh, I had Sam Silas one year help coach. I don't know if you guys remember Sam.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But Sam, he had trouble getting there on time and things like that. He was on that pro schedule, I guess, but he was a good influence on the kids and a lot of fun to be around. I can't think of who else we've had there. You got any others on the list?
Coach Pollock, the sports writers, you've already talked about Merle Jones. Talk about some of the others.
Mike Schwabel, he was the guy that covered us, and there was another writer at the paper, Larry Odell, who covered DuQuoin. He always wanted the two teams to get together because we were both undefeated. But, Merle Jones, he was a sports editor, and he was something. Man alive, that guy. He had a great sense of humor, and he was at every sporting events. He took Walt Moore and I one time to the World Pool Shooting Contest over at Johnson City. We stayed there all night. I'll never forget that, coming home in the morning, and the sun was coming up, and we were coming across the railroad tracks, and Walt and I were talking, what are we going to say when we get home? But we spent that whole night with Merle. But one of the funniest things, old Merle, back then nobody made money, the coaches or anything. You made very little money. And one time Merle went up to his boss and he said, "Look at here, boss." Said, "Mickey Mantle signed for $100,000." And his boss said, "But looky here, you get a company car." He said, "Boy, I didn't realize that little old Ford I was driving was worth $98,000."
How about Larry? Larry Doyle. Larry Doyle, the voice of the Terriers.
Yeah, he was the voice of the Terriers. Two things about old Larry. He used to sit up there. You remember a play we had called Waggle? Mm-hmm. And he would sit up there and he said, "I just keep waiting for the Terriers to run that wiggle waggle." But I'll tell you a good one on old Larry. One time, I was at a basketball game, and boy, I was proud. I had on a brand new leather coat. I mean, that baby was sharp, and it was expensive. And old Larry comes in there, and he starts talking, and he feels my coat. He said, "They're doing an awful lot of things with this plastic now, aren't they?" I'm ready to hit him.
We used to listen to him. I think we used to come up to the locker rooms on Saturday morning because it wasn't live. It was all on his recorder.
Yeah, old Larry, he sat up there in that booth, and, that little old booth he had over there, and he shared it with Homer Hansen and Harold Perkins. They did all the filming for us, and they all was up in that booth, Larry, and that was a crew up there too. But boy, we owe a lot of thanks to those people. And Larry, he was a great promoter of Terrier football, and of course Homer and Harold Perkins, they did a great job of doing the filming for us, even though the filming back then was something. Boys, you run 2 plays and the film would break. Run 2 plays and the film would break. And it's not like it is nowadays where you can trade films. Not many coaches would trade then. I always traded with Centralia. He would put them on the Greyhound bus up there on a Sunday, and I'd go down here and get them, and I'd put them on the Greyhound bus here and send them up to him. But there wasn't a lot of people. We always scouted Mount Vernon. We couldn't get a film on Mount Vernon, and we would go to Salem on a Sunday night and sit down up there and watch the film with their coach.
What comes to mind would have been the Cape Girardeau game. What I remember the most about the pregame ceremony and getting ready with Steve Waller would always vomit before every game, and then you knew he was getting ready. And then the game itself, the final play, the one mistake that sophomore quarterback made that whole night was that pitch. And it happened right in front of me, and with Whitson right tailing behind, and the ball came right up into his hands.
What was your thought at that moment? I know what we all remember, but what was your thought at that moment?
Well, there's 2 things. First of all, I hated playing Cape because Missouri schools always opened a week before us.
That's right.
And, that is when you really improve, when you get to that second game. And going down there, you never knew what to expect. And I don't know what I was thinking or anything. It's just something I just can't really recall anything that was special about that one particular play. We were blessed with Whitson. He had speed, that. Mm-hmm. And there was nobody going to catch him. But how many coaches in that situation would have run that play?
How many times you always coach kids and say, don't ever give up, never give up. And there was the opportunity where what you had told us, it paid off.
Yeah. Hey, like we were talking, the group of kids that we had played hard every play. They worked at it, and they would never give up. They were going to find a way to win regardless, and that's the type of kids we had.
That season about being prepared, do you remember how many nights before two-a-days started that we would go to the field and Panky and we'd have everybody would be there, and he would throw passes. We'd do down and outs a couple hours before every summer evening before those August two-a-days. So I think we all knew it too. We knew we had something and that we should work at it. The only thing that I regret was that we didn't have as much, or maybe we could have, is lift weights, free weights. I think if we had the facilities that kids have now, we would have been so much better. And I think my baseball career would have improved drastically with arm and upper body and all that kind of thing. So the only thing that I can say is I think we could have been even better had we been in a weight program.
I thought that one of the key ingredients of that group of kids was that we liked each other, we grew up around each other, and we depended on each other.
Yeah, that was the key. I mean, you can talk all you want. That's just like F Troop. Man, those guys supported everybody, and everybody that wasn't on F Troop loved the kids that was on F Troop, and that's just the way it was. It was a great group. I mean, they were behind each one, and just I don't care who it was, everybody was a friend of them.
How about Harry Schultz? Remember, we didn't have trainers back in those days like they have now. You know, SIU always has a guy come out, or all these other places. But Sportsology will donate a guy. Of course, the schools pay for him. But we had Harry Schultz, and he did a heck of a job for you.
Oh, yeah. Harry, he was super. I mean, Harry, he was very serious about that stuff. He went every place he could to learn how to tape ankles and do all of that stuff. And it was kind of a threesome, him and Petty and Bruce Houghton.
That's right.
And you remember when those guys would stay after practice and kick, and when
You fell off.
Petty kicked the ball and his shoe went up in the air and come down and hit him in the head, broke his glasses. I had to take him to the doctor. Oh, boy. Oh, man.
I think he still has a little scar right there I've seen before.
We had a kid. No, we had a kid.
You talked about the support you had from Carbondale High School, including the administration. Let's talk a little bit about the others involved beside the coaching staff.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Bowen. He was superintendent there, and he was a heck of a guy. One of the things I always remember about Mr. Bowen, he coached basketball for many, many years, back in the days when the old clock would turn red in the last minute.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Well, he would call a teacher in if he was wanting to get rid of them, or if they weren't going to be hired back. He'd say, "Young man, your clock's in the red." But you had to love him. The guy probably weighed 95 pounds total.
Oh, yeah.
But he was everywhere. And Scorchy McBride was another one. I always loved those Scorch. He was all for us. And Harold O'Neill, I'll never forget him. Old Harold came down there one day and said, "Let me tell you something. I always evaluate a team, how good they are at the end of the year, not at the beginning." He said, "If you improve every year, you've done a good job." And I learned that from Harold because I thought that was an important thing for a person to say. But then Reed Martin, he was the AD. Reed could be hard to get along with at times, but him and I and Walt were all close, and we got along pretty good. I told Reed one time, I said, "Damn, Reed, you're just a butthole at times." And he looked at me and he said, "But you're a butthole all the time." So he always had an answer for you. One time I called a joke into Reed. We was going through those bomb scares when every day we was getting a bomb scare. So I called Reed. I said, "Reed, you got a bomb in your desk." And I hung the phone up, and me and Walt went over there across the gym floor. Well, Reed was down on the floor. He had the drawer out of the desk. He said, "God damn, I just got a bomb scare. I just got a bomb scare." And he was on the phone with Scorchy, who was in the superintendent's office, and he said, "Scorch, I'm looking for it. And Scorch was on the phone with the police. And Walt hit me. He said, "You better say something." I said, "Reed, I called that in." He said, "Oh, just a minute, Scorch, is that damn Pollock." Scorch said, "Send him up here." I tell you another thing Scorchy McBride did. You remember back when we had all that streaking going on?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they were streaking out here on campus, and they would call in and said there'd be a streak this afternoon at 1:30 in front of Marsh Library. Well, old Dave Lee and I, we decided we was coming out to see that, so we snuck off, and we got out here, and we watched them streak. And the next day, Scorch called us into his office. He said, "Boys, what are you doing out there at the streak?" So we weren't out there streak. We was down there in the gym. "Boys, looky here. Tom Leffler, who was charged of security out here at the university, he had filmed every bit of that."
And you were right there.
Yeah, we were right there. But Tom was a good guy, He was just being funny about it, but he did have us on tape. Scorch, he didn't go for that either.
It was a a tough matchup for us back in '68, and they're still a tough matchup for us today. A bunch of track stars and everything, but it was a tough game to play in. It was a tough game to coach. What do you remember most about that, and the issues that were surrounding that game?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind, we couldn't have any fans up there. And if you remember, we had police on all four corners of the field holding back those dogs, no people in the stands or anything. That's one thing. The other thing is Cahokia was a heck of a football team that year because they had beaten both Belleville schools, West and East. And I'll never forget Petey Margettis was coaching there. And when the game was over, he said, we got a hell of a team. But he said, you were the best team on the field, which really made me feel good about that. So that's the things I remember about that, I guess, under the circumstances. And then we all got to go eat afterwards. And that that got our season over the hump. Because we had already played Centralia, and then to get Cahokia over the hump, well, we were ready.
That was the night at Augustine's.
Yeah, that's right, Augustine's. That's where we ate at.
That's right.
So was Ron Hines out of Heron.
He's back now. He's working over at Logan. I've worked with him a few basketball games.
Ron, he worked for WJPF out of Heron, and he was one of the leading sports shows in Southern Illinois at that time. He did a heck of a job. He had, and then he, at the end of the year, he had a banquet. WJPF had a banquet, and they honored coaches and everybody, and Ron was right there. He did a lot to promote Southern Illinois football.
We had a pretty good offense back then, 331 points in 10 games. We allowed only 85 on the year, 4 shutouts. But you got everybody into the game. And, the second half of the season, we only allowed 12 points, 6 points in Game 6 and 6 points in Game 7. But the thing was, you got everybody in the game when you could.
Well, now think about that. We had how many kids on that squad? 48? Because that's how many uniforms we had, and boy, that is tough. And you look around and you see kids that they want in there, and you think about them. But we were fortunate enough to have enough offense, explosion, that we could get up on teams that we could play people, and that would have been key. Had those been 6-0 ball games and 6-0, those guys would have been very, very dissatisfied and unhappy. And I doubt if they would have stayed with the program, But then again, when you're winning, it's easy to stay with it.
Even though you coach with discipline, you manage to have fun with the kids. And where did your coaching philosophy come from? Did that go back to maybe your high school, college coaches, or was that Coach Pollock yourself?
Well, I don't know about that. I just think that you have to have fun. Bob Spackman, who was a trainer here at SIU, he told someone one time, if you want to see how to run a football team, go out there to Carbondale High School, because the coach has fun and the kids have fun. And I think that, we all have to have it. Just going out there and playing touch sometimes was fun. It can't all be just football at that level. And we just had a lot of fun, and I think it's just the way I liked it. It's the way I liked it in high school, was to have a lot of fun, and I think that's what we did.
Go ahead.
In terms of a question, or just...
Yeah, go ahead and ask the question.
Oh, I'm just a follow-up, Roger. I just wanted to say that we touched on this earlier about how we got along and the chemistry we had on that team, and how it still plays on after 40-some-odd years later. We're still doing this kind of activity. We get together in the reunions, we email, we talk to one another. When we get together, we always go back to, at some point in the season, some of us that are gone were really involved with it. I think of Dick Lefevre, who always had more than a mind of a minutia about the minutes played, when he was, where it was, scores and everything. It was just something that touched us and stayed with us for a long, long time, and always will be, I'm sure.
You guys were always a close-knit. And going back to what I said in the beginning, there's a couple of things. First of all, you cannot have first-rate athletics with second-rate citizens. So you people were all first-rate citizens. Look at where, like I said earlier, where you're at today. You're good people. Good people hang together, and that was the whole key. And like I said, we got people who are doctors and lawyers and broadcasters, everything. But they're all good people, and to me, that's the most important thing. It's not about me. It's about a group of people that are together.
You coached at Carbondale 10 years, and then you got a call in to go elsewhere. What drew you away from Carbondale? That was 5 years after we all graduated, but I know you went to El Dorado and have been there ever since. What drew you away?
Well, things, it was kind of a personal issue. We had a few problems there in the athletic department, and we weren't getting along, and David Lee was a basketball coach, and he was going to McLeansboro. And things just fell apart on us, to be honest with you, and there's no sense in really getting into that, who was involved or anything, but things just fell apart.
Pankey and Striegel talk of you as like you were a second father to them. What did you do over the years to nurture relationships like that?
Well, Bobby lived across the street, and he lost his father. But going back before that, Bobby was a quarterback, and we spent a lot of time together working on fundamental principles, talking football. He would come over to the house, and I think that's what really the time that Bob and I spent together. Now, the Striegel, that's a whole different story. He came there all the time to the house and would lay on the couch like he owned the place, and he would eat there. Oh, I love that guy, but he was part of the family, and the whole Striegel family was that way. You got to mention Doc Striegel in the book. Doc, how could you forget him? He had filmed the ball games and stand up there, and oh boy. When you ever going to put in a reverse? I'm so damn tired of watching football games without a reverse in them.
Doc Striegel, when we were sitting there at the table and Clarence Cochran was with us and mentioned about during the oil embargo in '73 when you couldn't get any gas, Doc had Clarence Cochran and Mike set up a tank out by their house in the bushes, and he had all the gas he could ever want, 250 gallons delivered every week. And there were big time laws against that too.
Dave Lee and I went out to his house one Sunday to put a basketball goal up, Doc Striegel's, and we started working that thing, and all of a sudden this guy appears and went, "Hey, that ain't where I want that goddamn thing. I want it over there on the other end. What the hell are you thinking?" So finally he comes out. They're getting ready to go to church, and he's drinking a beer. And Tom Striegel says, "Dad, can I go get one?" "No, you ain't going to church with beer on your breath. Here, take one drink. That's all you get." He gave that kid a shot of beer.
That sounds so much like it.
Hey, you remember that wine cellar you had down there? Ah, damn, the glasses would actually stick to the table. And you go down here, let me get that up for you. Oh, man.
Oh, God.
Remember Louis? Louis was a graduate of Notre Dame. A lot of people did not know that. See, and he was sharp when it came to football. And that was his life, was that football, running that clock up there and taking care of the Terriers. And he did it for many years.
I was on the kickoff team and return, and every time I always lined up on the ends, and wherever I was, it seemed like him and another group of guys would get down there and hit somebody. I could just, he was just like in my ear. He was just right there. Louis Chauvin and the town coaches, we called them, and they've never missed a game. They were always there.
I can't remember who was on the chain gang then.
Oh, I can't either.
I don't.
Was Shorty Tate? Do you remember Shorty Tate? I don't know that but it seemed like I remember seeing him from I don't remember at all, though. No.
I'm trying to think.
A recollection of what an undefeated season would mean to CCHS back in '68. It'd been, I believe, 1937 since they were. Well, no, Coach Blair had
Yes,
two
he did.
undefeated teams, and he had some that
And the Black
had lost
Diamond,
one.
yeah.
But did you have any idea what it would mean to Carbondale High School to go undefeated back then?
Well, two things. Our student body was very, very supportive and very much behind us. But the community itself, and there are some very knowledgeable football people in Carbondale. You get out away from here, you find schools, the guys just jump up and holler and don't know what they're talking about. But here you have that, and this university crowd that we had out here, those people that were Abe Martin and people like that were attending our ball games, they appreciated that football. And it was more of a community thing, I think, because I can Bill Gasaway, people like that,
Yeah.
that was all over town. They were at those ball games, and Larry Drake and his brother Frankie and Larry Jacober, those guys were all right there. And
Made the road trips.
They didn't miss a
That was
game.
part of the junior high faculty, too, that you guys were. Some of us went to Giant City, but there at Lincoln Junior High, we had a lot of coaches that followed us afterwards. After we left grades or junior high and went on to high school games, they were always there. You're right.
Yeah, and I can't remember, but we had a lot of women back then that followed the team. Who was the cheerleading sponsor then?
Betty.
Not Busby.
Busby?
Wasn't it? I thought
Busby?
she was.
Was it Busby or?
I don't think Betty ever.
Maybe she came later. That's all I remember being. Let's see, there was wasn't Miss Sophie.
Yeah, old Norm Finley, he was a great one. Boy, you talk about stories. Him and Buck Bowen could tell them. Old Norm used to tell stories about when he coached freshman basketball and how he had a kid over at Johnson City that was chasing his kid all over the floor. And he told that kid, "You go sit on the top row of the bleachers." And he said, "Damn fat kid didn't follow him up there." Yeah. But and Joe Shiplet, Joe, he was off to
band,
himself.
yeah.
But he did a great job with the band and our homecoming parades and everything. Joe was right there and very, very supportive of us. So you don't want to leave him out. And
The parades were a big deal.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed them. I mean, then
a lot different than what the
Yeah, it
parades.
was.
Yeah.
What has changed negatively and positively about high school football since then, in your opinion?
Well, positive, I think, guys, the weights, how much bigger and stronger kids are nowadays. But you can't take that away from the kids that played back when you guys were playing, because had you had that same opportunity, you would have done that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Larry Lutz, if he had the weights that they have nowadays, he'd have been right there among them, and so would you and everybody else. So I think one of the biggest changes has to do with weights and then all-weather tracks. Carbondale was the first school to have an all-weather track in southern Illinois, but not very many schools had that. So those two things, the fitness part of it or the physical part of it, has changed. It's bigger, faster, and stronger. Negative, I don't know. There's just attitudes of kids is altogether different. Attitudes of parents is altogether different. But I just don't think the kids nowadays have the attitude. You'll have a team that'll have 2 or 3, but you'll never get a team with 11 offense, 11 defense that had the attitude that the people had back then. I think that's a big difference.
It's always amazed me about you is that over the years, there's many athletes that you have coached, as many students you have coached, that you always have time for us as individuals. I mean, the phone calls that you have made to me, and just remembering how, and over 40 years of coaching, and teaching, do you remember everybody like that?
Well, 2 things here. First of all, I think if you've coached, you cannot coach without putting your arm around a kid, and you can't put your arm around a kid and not know who he is, a little bit about him. So I think that is one of the key things right there is that you're going to know who they are, and every kid has got some good in him. I don't care who you are, somebody loves you. We've got kids that come from bad homes and all that, but there's a grandmother or somebody back there that loves that kid, and that kid may need your love more than he needs your coaching. So you got to think in terms of that. You can't treat everybody alike, though. You know that, and I know it, because there's different desires, different needs. But I just kind of like to say that all the years I coached, I've been associated with good people. And I think that's the key to whatever you do is good people. And as I said earlier, first-rate citizens. And boy, this team that you guys were on was all first-rate citizens.
I'm on the stage in the gym, and in that 67 year when we were juniors, there was a game where Ted, it was a home game where Ted Bateau had fallen down and started to roll. And we remembered how round and big Ted was, but he rolled and took out the entire inside, all the linemen. And I remember you saw that and said, now boys, here's the way you want to block. And we kept watching it back and forth and back, and I'd never have forgotten that. And still, if I saw Ted, he's up in DeSoto, but someone told me they talked to him or saw him not too long ago, and he's doing well. He's still up.
I thought was he not still teaching?
I don't know. I'm not sure above it, but I still remember that.
School late in life.
Yeah, sure did.
Now, let me ask you, I can't remember who all was on the F Troop.
Etherton.
I played some.
Yeah.
I played some.
Clarence Comer.
What was it? Donkey? Was that what they called Etherton?
No, that was Steve.
Steve Ragsdale.
Yeah, Ragsdale.
Yeah.
And
Oaks was on
David
F
Oaks.
Troop quarterback.
David Oaks. T. Thomas.
yeah.
Jim Temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tough little kid. Yeah.
Floyd DeBow.
Yeah.
Floyd.
Yeah.
That was the question that some of the guys had. Back in the 60s, there wasn't a lot of black participants in high school football, at least at Carbondale, but you got several black athletes out.
Well, Baltimore helped an awful lot on that. You know, we were in a summer, we started a summer school program where we brought them up to the school. Most of them wanted to play basketball, but we had a fitness program going with that where they ran and they jumped and they caught the ball, and we were able to get some people out of that. You know, the Lasters and Floyd DeBow and Hobo and guys like that, they all came out.
Yeah.
One night, and Bill Jackson said, "Madam Butterfly, can I get you a drink?"
Oh.
Oh, did she explode on him? No, and I am not Madam Butterfly.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever remembered seeing her or meeting her for sure.
You and I were talking about that, and I don't.
Walt's wife. And do you know what the two sons, where they are now, Coach?
Yeah. Well, see, I spoke at Walt's funeral a couple of years ago in Mount Vernon. They're both up in Macomb.
Oh, that's right.
That's where he went, and they've all stayed there. In
Yeah.
fact, one of them's a custodian at Western Illinois University, and the other one, I don't know what he's doing, but they're both up there.
Do you keep in contact with any of the other coaches that are still around?
Only when I see them.
Southern Illinois Coaches Association dinners and functions?
Southern Illinois Coaches Association. That's a pretty good organization. You know, I've been a member of that. I've had some organizations. I was on the Chicago Tribune All-State Board. I was on the committee that helped set up the football playoffs. So I've got to know a lot of coaches around the state.
Did teams after us that you thought achieved had the same attitude and maybe the same?
Never was another team that was as close and as talented and as good a football team as your team was. The 67 team was the start of it, but there was always one or two that could be a loose cannon. But our team was never like that. I mean, you had to stay after some of them. You know that.
yeah.
God, you had to stay. Lefevre, he was a good football player on Friday nights, but boy, he'd take a play off in practice. or two.
Took the gas pipe.
Yeah.
Quite often.
Yeah. But that's part of it.
I think some of those man versus food shows would put him. I can still see it. It was a mound of wings. They must have eaten 100 of them. It was good chicken. I do remember that.
Going to Ma Hale's, those were fun nights.
Yeah, it was good.
I can remember
the
one.
banquet was a fun time too.
Oh
down at
man, the
Elks.
banquets were good, weren't they? We used to have good banquets. And now, were you guys in school when we had the banquets where we gave out gag gifts?
I don't think so.
Oh man, we had some gag gifts. We had a football with a handle on it. Went to the guy that fumbled the most.
Oh, that'd be good. Yeah.
Was you guys in on that? Oh
think we
man,
had
we had some things. Everybody on the team got a gift. And Roger Lipe, I don't know, you guys remember?
I know Roger.
Rod, he used to try to kick extra points, and he got a shirt that said, "I can't kick."
I should have had one of those.
Who else? I'm trying to think who all was on that team. Oh man.
That might have been one of your last teams at Carbondale.
Yeah, it
I was going to
was.
say he was
Yeah.
around 73, 74.
But I thought we did have a gag gift for you guys.
What was Tony Blair after that?
Yeah.
Tony, okay, that was one of Bob's younger brothers too. Jim or Tom would have been in Tony's class. It seemed like their ages were almost identical. The Striegels and the Blyers is what I remember. Bob and Rocky, and then on the way down.
Rockney Blair.
Yep.
Do you remember Frank Leahy?
Yep.
Yeah.
He was one of the first ones to ever speak here.
Really?
Well, see, Frank Blair,
Oh, well, yeah, I knew.
when Frank got out of coaching, he ran for state, I don't know, senator or representative. And he had been at Notre Dame, so Newt Rockney came here, spoke down there. Frank and I went out with him, spent almost the whole night together. Interesting and funny stories.
Frank Leahy was the coach when Army had Doc and all those players from after World War II, and
Red
that was
Blake
big.
was the coach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And Army, what was it, Davis and
Glenn Davis, Doc Blanchard.
that's it. Yeah, Davis and Blanchard. That was 48, 40. Yeah, that was some great games back then.
Yeah, Frank had Leahy here, and that's one of his boys is Frank Leahy Blair.
Frankie, the doctor?
Yeah, that's Frank Leahy Blair, and then you got Newt Rockney Blair.
Right.
Every one of them's named
He's
after.
the one I knew the most. Rocky. I knew Rocky better than any of them.
I'll tell you another guy that was a good guy. It was Bill O'Brien. I don't know if you ever remember him.
I remember Bill.
I knew him afterwards.
Bill
He was an official.
was a great friend of Duffy Daugherty's. You know who he was? Coach
yeah,
at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Okay. They came here, and Michigan State came here, and we all went out to eat. And it was Bill O'Brien and his wife, Duffy Daugherty, and I can't remember who the quarterback coach was, but he was with him. And the Lefevres, all of us went to Holiday Inn. But Bill O'Brien and Duffy were very, very close friends, goes back to the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And Bill O'Brien had a bulldog, and it was named Duffy.
Really?
Yeah, it was named after him. But you get around those guys, they could tell stories. Now, Duffy Daugherty always talked about getting his team fired up, and he would set it up with the police department. Now, I want you to come out there with the lights on and a siren going at exactly 10 minutes after 4 when I'll have them in a huddle. And you jump out of that car and you say, "I'm taking that son of a bitch in." And he said this guy would show up, and then I'd jump up and I said, "You ain't taking any of my players." And then he said the rest of the coaches that followed, he said before long we'd have the whole squad back there. Now we're a team.
You know, that brings up a question. How did you know when to hit the right button? I mean, when we needed it or any team needed it, how did you know when?
I don't know that, but I do know that I studied defenses, and I was pretty fortunate in finding the weaknesses of the defenses that we were going against, and I think that had a lot to do with it. But getting back here to when Frank Leahy was here, he talked about how important it is. If you're on a football team and you're not starting or anything, it's so important for you to make those coaches notice you. And he said, at Notre Dame, we had the wooden fence all the way around the football field. And he said, I had them in a huddle, and I was telling them, damn it, boys, I know y'all want to play, but you're going to have to do something to let us recognize you and see what you can do. He said this big kid jumped up and ran right through that fence. He come jogging back. He said, Coach, did you recognize me? He told that as a true story.
Oh, wow.
One time, I don't know if you remember this, and I think it was a Centralia game, and we thought we were playing pretty good at the time, and I think in reality the game was 21-7 at the half or something like that. And you came in, and we're in the locker room up in the gym, and you got mad at us, and you turn around and you smash the chalk up against the board, and it's just, and then you turn around and give them the blankety blank ball. I'm through with you. And you walked out and slammed the door, and we got quiet. You went into the coach's room, and I remember that, and we thought you quit on us. And then you come back out about 2-3 minutes later.
Well, your football team, the thing I regretted the most about that year was the ass chewing I put on Larry Lutz at West Frankfort. To this day, I feel guilty about that. Larry wasn't playing very well at the first half, and I went in there and I eat him alive. And he cried. He came back out the second half, and on the kickoff, he liked to kill the guy. I don't think he ever played better in his life. But I felt so bad about that, and Walt Moore came over there. He said, you big son of a bitch, I'd knock your ass off if I could. He said, you cut him to the quick. There was no sense in that, and I'll never forget that, and I felt bad about that all my life.
I was right behind him, and I saw him do something after that in that second half of just we had one of those stunts going on, and I would always, it was either I would tell him which way I'm going to go, that way, and you always touched his hip, with the left hip or right hip, which way you were going to go, and he took an angle toward the center and just knocked that whole line down. And one guy just taking the center with him, just like a bulldozer, knocked him off there. Boy, the guy ran right into me. Then it was Tim Richie is who it was. Yeah. He was a sophomore, and he had knees that come up and knock you in the head. And he stayed in education too himself, I think. Tim Richie was. That's what I thought.
West Frankfort. Yeah, Tim's over there. You remember when they were recruiting Pankey, and we were at Pankey's house. Dan Devine from Missouri was here, and Eddie Crowder, who was a coach at Colorado, called. He was at the Holiday Inn in Carbondale, and there had been a mix-up. His assistant had scheduled him in there that night to see Bobby, and Devine got on the phone and he said, Crowder, stay the hell out of my recruiting territory.
Coach, do you think if we had playoffs back then, would we have drawn DuQuoin and would have been our first? How would that have worked? I mean, in today's setup, would we have played because our school sizes were too big, or would we have been in a different class? Or
back then it was one class. But that's a good question. I would have thought that.
I don't know.
It depends on how many teams would have gone in.
I would have.
We would have ended up with them in our bracket somewhere along the line. Yeah.
Was that a thought? And I remember they were talking about a Super Bowl of the South, and it was going to be Carbondale and DuQuoin at McAndrew.
Yeah.
And so that was a real thought between you guys.
Yeah. Well, that was more of a talk between the newspapers.
Okay.
Because you could not get permission from the Illinois High School Association. See, we played all the way up to Thanksgiving back then, and you couldn't play a game after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So that was kind of out the window.
Your thoughts on the playoff system today, as far as should it go back to a 10-game season, or do we need playoffs? They got 8 classes, and you drive 1 million miles a lot of times, especially when they put 5 and 4 in the playoffs. And in my opinion, 5 and 4 doesn't belong.
I agree with you. I was on the playoff board now, going back, and we studied different states, but I'm not a big playoff person. I'm like you, 5-4 going against 8-1 or something like that, and it's just too many teams, and there's too many private schools now and all of that. I'm not for it.